Hello. Hello. We're going to start in just a minute. Thank you, Zoom people. Just a couple minutes, we're going to start. I got a couple of people here in the room. I'm just going to give it a minute for few other people to join us, then we'll get going. Okay. I think we've waited long enough. It's 2 o'clock and you guys are all here, so we're going to get started. Welcome Macy and Manish and Geronimo and Selena here in the room. And we're going to talk today about understanding home inspection reports. And what I want to start with is asking you guys what you want to learn about this subject of home inspections and home inspection reports. Hi, Macy.
Hi, how are you?
Good, good. What would you like to learn today about this?
I would like to know how do you pick the right home inspector for the property, for the right property?
I think that's great. I'm playing with volume here. I absolutely will answer that question. I want to get you in on the main speaker of the room here and not uh on my machine. Can you talk a little more to say something?
Yeah, sure. Happy Sunday,
Perfect.
everyone. Can you
Uh,
hear me?
uh, now they can all hear you. Um, Manish, I don't know if you can come off of mute. Is there anything you're particularly interested in?
No, I generally just want to understand what to look for. Like when I read a report, it's kind of sometimes a big document, and I want to know what is most important to focus on, what to watch for, and things like that.
Oh, those are great things. We're going to cover that as well. All right. What about in the room? Anything you're particularly interested in learning about home inspections?
How to read which one is like most important, I guess, like
How to like prioritize what you're
yeah.
reading, how to know what's important and what's not important. That's a very important subject. Anything else, or are we good? That's three very good things. So we're going to dive in. Here's what we're going to do, and welcome Madison. And by the way, all of you on Zoom, please feel free to unmute and ask questions in real time. It's going to be harder for me to look at chat while we're going through this. So, because I'm managing the slide deck. So just come off of mute and talk if you want. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about what a home inspection is and what it isn't. We're going to make it really clear. We're going to talk about why buyers order them and why sellers order them. We're going to talk about both general considerations for a home inspection and specific considerations that you should think about as agents. We're going to talk about choosing a home inspector and evaluating the home inspector, how you order inspections and how to think about that and how to think about pricing. And there'll be time at the end for questions. So let's dig right in. A home inspection is a report you're going to get about the systems of the property. Systems of the property. For example, the electrical, plumbing, and heating, um, the flooring, the walls, the doors, the windows, the attic and the crawl space if the house has a crawl space, exterior lot and detached buildings, when you order a home inspection, the home inspector may ask you, are there any detached garages or outbuildings? The roof and gutters, not always. Chimney and fireplace, not always, sometimes. And certainly any visible condition issues. That's what a home inspection it is. It is not, let me see, it is not anything about structural wood damage caused by termites or other wood destroying organisms. That's in California. That's because California has a licensing procedure. Anybody who is going to remediate termites and wood destroying insects that damage structural things like wood framing, those guys have to have a license. So your general home inspectors won't touch it, right? They'll say consult the pest inspector. Okay, so they are not going to have much to say about it. It is not a foundation inspection. Now, experienced home inspectors will tell you something about it. And if they feel there's a problem, they will say, you should get a structural engineer out here. But this is not a foundation review or inspection. It is more general than that. Furthermore, a home inspector does not look at what are considered non-standard amenities of a house. For example, the irrigation system is not inspected. The sump pump. The sump pump is the thing in the garage that gets the water out from underneath the house. Or it might not be in the garage, it might be in the backyard, but wherever it is. They don't inspect hot tubs. They don't inspect alarm systems. They don't inspect solar panels. Anything that is considered non-standard is not part of an inspection. You will need to hire specialists in those areas if your buyer or seller wants those inspected. A home inspection does not include any appraisal issue or market valuation. The home inspector does not comment on whether the price is right. Furthermore, they have several pages in almost all of these reports of caveats and things why it might not be accurate. So there's basically no warranty or guarantee provided by these inspectors. In fact, in California, you don't even need a license. So hello. So that's what's not included in the inspection. So why do buyers and sellers order these, right? Buyers order them because they want to do their due diligence. They know it's important for them to look at the systems of the house, electrical, plumbing, heating, making sure everything is in order. It can improve their negotiating power. If they find out that the house needs a new furnace and forced air heating system, that could run into tens of thousands of dollars. And if it wasn't known before, it gives them some leverage with the seller. It will teach them, it allows them to learn how things work. When a buyer goes on the inspection with the home inspector, the inspector walks them around and points out this and points out that. So it's an educational thing for your buyers. It teaches them also, the inspector will tell them, and you have to remember to do this every year, and you have to remember to do that. And usually there's a written report they get that gives them more about how to maintain their property. Now, this is especially important for first-time buyers who may not know anything about owning a house. They maybe have lived with family or lived in an apartment and never had to do maintenance. Sometimes buyers get these reports because the lender requires it. Especially in situations where there is a down payment assistance program coming from a municipality or from a third party. Sometimes those third parties that are providing down payment assistance require a buyer to get a home inspection report. Why do sellers get them? Sellers want to reduce the risk of buyer cancellation. We advise our sellers all the time. If you get a pre-inspection, and you put the money out, you will save yourself headache later because you don't want to discover the problem. You don't want the buyer to discover the problem. You want to discover the problem. So you can go to market without, and then you get a buyer, they know what they're buying, and they're less likely to want out of the deal. So you reduce the risk of the buyer canceling on something that nobody knew about. It also helps you to know what needs repair. You might think everything is working great, but you do, and the home inspector says, well, you really should repair this, and it's something that buyers might be turned off buying the house if it isn't fixed, right? It makes the property more marketable. When you guys look at disclosure packages you find online and they don't have a home inspection report, you might be inclined to want to have an investigation contingency with your offer. But if it does include full reports as well as the required legal disclosures, then it's more marketable for the seller. He might get some non-contingent offers. And that's the next point. Improves the likelihood of non-contingent offers. And then finally, in the San Francisco Bay Area, it is almost expected now. 9 times out of 10, your disclosure package from the seller will include a home inspection. It's kind of baked into the market in many of our communities. Not so if you go east and north of here. If you go into Contra Costa, a lot of agents don't order them for their sellers. If you go further away up into Solano County or into Sacramento County, Yolo County, further away, it's not common. It's a Bay Area phenomenon that sellers pay for these. So, some things to think about with a home inspection. The sad story is there is no standard format. Every different inspector reports the data differently. So you need to understand how they're reporting the data. Some have it organized, very clearly labeled, urgent, repair, maintenance, safety, in a very easy to read grid format. Other people use a chart format. Other people write essays. It's all over the map. These inspections by the home inspector are non-invasive. What do I mean by non-invasive? They're not looking behind walls. They're not going to move furniture. They're not going to lift carpets. They're not going to disturb owner personal belongings. And they're not going to look at things that they can't see or reach around to look at. They're not going to do it. So if there's a problem hidden, it will not be discovered by a home inspection report. They are not always comprehensive. So you have to remember that houses are living, breathing organisms in a way, and they are complicated. And a 2 or 3 hour home inspection is never going to reveal all of the potential issues associated with a house. And so when you're talking to your buyers who are relying on the seller's inspection without doing their own, they're selling themselves short. And you have to remind them that when they get the keys, they should expect to find stuff that wasn't in the home inspection report. It doesn't matter how good your home inspector is, they're not going to see everything. You get 2 inspectors out, you'd be shocked at the different things that they find. That's a reason for something else we're going to talk about later. The other thing about home inspections, guys, is you don't need a license. You don't need a license. The better home inspectors belong to a trade group. The same way we are all realtors, there are several trade groups for home inspectors, and that gives them some, cachet. That gives them some weight. Oh, I'm a member of this association, and we have these ethical standards, and we have these classes. Therefore, I'm better than the other guy who doesn't have the certification. But it's not a licensing standard. It's merely a career development move and a marketing move. So you don't know the quality of the home inspector except by referral basis when you first start with someone you haven't worked with before. In our area, the Bay Area, the typical condo, a small condo, an hour. They're there on an hour, maybe less if it's a studio. There's not much to do. But a big house, 4 hours is not uncommon. We strongly urge you to go with your clients, whether you are especially if you are representing the buyer. If you're representing the seller, there's not that education component about how the house works issue as much, but your buyer should be there. They should see what the home inspector points out to them and understand what they're buying behind the wall, like behind the glitz, right? Like to understand these things. So I recommend that you guys go as well. When with you, if your client is going, you should be there too. You can bring perspective that the home inspector won't comment on. We're going to talk a little more about that. Remember that these inspectors, even in a house that is quote unquote perfect, free of any visual defects, everything's working great, they'll find something wrong. That's their job. You never get a report with nothing on it. Typically, in a case like that, if it is a resale property, they'll point out how the house is not up to current code. A very common thing they point out is the lack of arc fault circuit interrupters. I'm sorry, I forget the acronym. There's two types of electrical problems that I'm thinking of acronyms. One is GFCI. That's the little button on your bathroom to make it so that it trips if water gets anywhere near the outlet. Well, they have something similar that goes inside the panel, the electrical panel at the side of the house, on the inside, on the garage maybe, or outside. Most homes built that have been built before, I don't know when it changed, do not have these arc fault circuit interrupters. So that's a very good example of something you're going to see in a report on an almost perfect house, right? There's always going to be something for their report. No home is perfect. No home is up to code unless it's brand new construction. And even then, it's shocking how much the home inspector finds where the builder might have cut corners. Most of the time, your home inspector is not a contractor, nor an engineer, nor anyone who repairs things on a regular basis. And so no two inspections or inspectors will ever report the same findings. They're all going to focus slightly differently based on their experience and their kinds of, not just their experience doing home inspections, but the type of homes they've inspected and where they've inspected homes. All of those factor into it. Another thing you should know about home inspections is they never provide pricing. Unlike a pest report, which always provides pricing. Why? Because the state of California requires it, because pest inspectors have to be licensed. But for home inspectors who do not have to be licensed, it's like the Wild West, they don't provide any pricing. Now, some inspection companies are connected to a contractor license, and they can provide bids either with the home inspection or after the fact. And you can, if you have a good home inspector with experience, you can always get them to ballpark it. So how much do you think it's going to cost to replace this furnace and all the ductwork? You can ask the question, and they won't write anything down, but they'll give you a verbal, which can be very helpful when you're there with your client. Because we would all agree, I think, that if your client hears a 5-figure $10,000 to $20,000 bill estimate versus a $500 to $1,000 bill estimate, their perception of the severity of it is going to be impacted. You can, with your buyers, and especially in a very competitive market, try to get in with your inspector before offer deadline so that your buyer wants to be competitive. There's going to be lots of offers. You think it's going to go non-contingent, but your buyer wants to know what they're buying and doesn't trust the seller's reports. The buyer can often do a pre-inspection with their own inspector. Normally, it's verbal only. They don't get a report. The seller agent needs to agree to do it. Many sellers agents will allow you to do it, but they'll usually say to you, but I don't want any report. Why? Because the seller is obligated to share what he knows about the property, and if he knows about the existence of a written report, he has to tell other buyers about it, even if he already did his own home inspection report. So your listing agents are going to be wary. They may say, I don't want to know about it. You can go there. And the other thing about pre-offer inspections is remember the home, if it's vacant and on a lockbox, there may be other buyers coming through. You're not going to have an exclusive private window where no one else is coming through usually. You can request it, but you have to have a pretty good relationship with the listing agent to do that. But it could be huge. If your buyer needs to be very competitive and is a little nervous about writing non-contingent, this could increase their confidence to the point where they're willing to do that. So it's always something you want to have a conversation about. But there's a big financial risk because if you're under contract and you spend X dollars on a home inspection, that's one thing. It's just part of your due diligence. But if you do a big financial cost of a home inspection before you even have your offer accepted, and your offer is not accepted, or you ultimately decide not to write, then that's lost money. So when I discuss this with my buyers, first of all, I only recommend it if it's very competitive and we think we're going to have to go non-contingent. And number two, my buyers being realistic. Sometimes buyers are not realistic about the offer price they want to do. They want to do, so you tell them it's going to go 1.7 and they only want to write at 1.5. Why would you then encourage them to spend $500 to $1,000 on an pre-inspection? Just write what they want if they won't be realistic. Have them learn the hard way, right? So those are conversations you want to have. So, some specific things. Your buyers often will see a home inspection provided by the seller. Your job first is to verify that the seller provided report was completed in the last 2 to 3 months. You guys would not be surprised to know, I hope, that sometimes these disclosure packages have inspection reports that are 6 months old. A lot can happen to a house in 6 months. Number two, understand, we've talked a little bit about the limitations of the report, but a couple of things you should look for. Kitchen appliance inspections. Most of these home inspectors do not do anything more than open the fridge and make sure all the lights turn on and that it's cold, and the icebox is cold. And then they turn on the stove and they make sure all the elements are on and the oven heats up and the fan turns on and off. And then for the appliance, for the dishwasher, they run a half cycle, the good ones. So the kitchen appliance inspection, very often stuff will happen after the fact because the kitchen appliances were not inspected thoroughly. Okay. Also, when you read the seller's report, you want to know what items were excluded. Sometimes they will exclude items and say, we did not inspect this because. You want to know about that before you write the offer on whether you're going to go contingent or not. You want your buyer to know that they didn't inspect the crawl space. Now that raises all kinds of questions. Why didn't they inspect the crawl space? Sometimes they will tell you a reason. It was soaking wet. It was dangerous for me to go underneath there. I'm going to sink in the mud. Or maybe they didn't go into the attic because there was no hatch anywhere to get into the attic. Whatever there is, you want to know about it because that will inform your discussion with your buyer about whether they should get their own home inspection and what they need to know from the seller as part of their due diligence. Most of the good inspectors will separate out urgent matters and safety-related matters. Sometimes this will freak out a first-time buyer because there's all these electrical things that get pointed out. You want to talk about that with your buyer, talk about what the fix includes, especially homes that were built in the 50s, 40s, 30s to the 70s. Some of these older homes, you'll have some wiring anomalies that they'll point out as safety related. You want to go through those with your client. So part of your job is to evaluate the relative importance of items on the report, but we also have an obligation not to prejudge what's important for the client. Okay, we cannot put ideas in their head. We need them to come to us first. So the way you do it is you say, Mr. Buyer, please read over the home inspection report and let's have a meeting on Tuesday at 9 and at our meeting, I'd like you to tell me what you had questions about from the report. In the meantime, you're going to read the report too, And then after the buyer has shared with you their concerns or issues or questions, you're going to come with yours. I promise you the list will be different. Okay. But you may see stuff that they don't see that'll help them to see you as an expert and a reliable guide on the journey. Okay. So just be careful. Make sure they come first. You know what their concerns are first. So you're representing a buyer. One of the things you want to think about is based on your needs assessment with the buyer, their financial means, and you know their sensitivities as you've learned them. What is important for them? What is less important? Not everything on a home inspection board is going to get repaired. Sometimes some stuff never gets repaired. For example, a home inspection report will almost always tell you that the slats in the railing separating the second floor from the first floor, you know, you come have a two-story house and there'll be a railing that prevents people from falling off the side of the stairs, right? Well, very often in homes that were built before some year, usually something in the 2000s, the slats are too wide and they don't meet modern code. And buyers see this, and we see this all the time. How big a deal is that? If your family, if the buyer doesn't have any small children, it's less of a concern than if your buyer has small children. Okay, so things are relative to who your buyer is and what's going to be important to them. Now, if you're a listing agent, your perspective is different. You want to be looking at the home inspection report for items that, if repaired or replaced, will improve saleability or ROI, return on investment. If the improvement that the home inspector is pointing out does not make the home more sellable or improve how much money they're going to get for the house, then you shouldn't do it. As a listing agent, I tell my sellers, don't worry about that. Okay. However, sometimes stuff that isn't particularly costly will make a big difference in sellability. For example, let's suppose you have a garage with drywall on the inside, and then on two of the three sides of the garage, it's say an attached garage. You have three sides, right? You have the back wall where the door is to the kitchen, and then you have two side walls. Well, what if one side wall has all this graffiti and all this mess on it, badly painted, and the other two walls are white, right? You'd want to paint the third side, right? Because that would affect the sellability of the home. That's just a simple example. You're going to encounter stuff like that. Not a big expense, but definitely you want the seller to attend to that. That's the kind of thing you can observe. Your home inspection is going to point out stuff that you might miss when they do the crawl in the crawl space, or when they go look in the attic. They might find an electrical junction, an open live wire in the attic. That is worth the seller fixing, because a buyer who sees an open live wire on an inspection report is almost certainly going to want it repaired, because that's a pretty big safety issue. So working with your guys are new, so I get that you may not be able to make these evaluations instantaneously just because you don't have as much experience, but your mentors do, and your mentors can help you. You know, you could go to your mentor and you can say, you know, is this a big deal? And your mentor will be able to help you understand the implications, or me. When are inspections unnecessary? You should always be encouraging your buyer to get an inspection, even if the seller disclosure package has it. You should always be encouraging your seller to get it because it'll make their property more marketable, like we talked about. So to follow up on this, even if they're buying new construction, even if the property is less than 20 years old, even if the seller's provided a report, you should be advising them to get an inspection and spend the money. Now, they can say, no, I don't want to. That's okay. They have to sign a form which specifically says they are not going to do these inspections. That's okay. But your due diligence requires you to ask them and encourage them. Was there a question?
Yes, even brand new construction.
Yes, you want to try to get it. Some builders won't let you do it and will strongly discourage it, but others will allow you to bring in your own inspector. And it's amazing. It's actually terrifying how these builders of new construction make mistakes. And your good home inspector will be able to point those mistakes out. What the builders of new construction will do is they will do a blue tape walkthrough about a week or 10 days before the buyer gets the keys to the newly built home, where the buyer and their agent can go through and see blue tape things, but blue tape where there's some aesthetic problem, right? But doing a blue tape visual inspection of aesthetic things is very different than a home inspection, who's going to be testing functionality of things. So wherever possible, I want my home inspector at the blue tape walkthrough or at an earlier time. Oftentimes, new construction isn't even finished or ready for occupancy until a week before the keys are supposed to be transferred. So sometimes things happen very fast in new construction. But a builder doesn't want an unhappy buyer in new construction, ever. So the good builders, the ethical ones, will look at the blue tape report. They'll look at what happens in the blue tape inspection. And if your home inspector is there, even if he doesn't do a report, but he just walks through with you and gives you some guidance about what he's seeing, that's an edge. He may charge less if he doesn't have to do a report.
Can I ask a quick question? It's
That's
like-
why, yes, absolutely. Please do.
Yeah, I just wonder, you just mentioned, what if the seller doesn't want to do the report? Is it we have to fill out a form? Is that right or no?
In new construction, sometimes the sales office will discourage you from bringing in a third-party inspector. If it's resale and you write an offer, your offer should include an investigation contingency for all the inspections and investigations you want.
Mhm.
Now, if a seller doesn't want you to do inspections at all in resale world, that's a huge red flag. I would be very suspicious if a listing agent says, no, you can't do any inspections. You have to buy it as is right now. That would be, I would be a showstopper for me and my buyers.
Mhm.
Did I answer your question?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Okay. So how do we pick a home inspector? How do we decide who's the right one for us? Well, research the inspector and their company. Look them up on the Googles and the Yelps. Talk to other agents in the office. Ask other agents in the office, your mentor, your PC, other senior agents. Have you ever worked with Bill Smith? Is he any good? Does the inspector belong to any of these trade groups and have a certification? Ask them if it isn't on their website. Do they even have a website? There are some fly-by-night people who get into this business as a quick way to make money and don't really take it seriously. How well organized are their reports? Before you work with someone for the first time, ask to see their work product. Ask to see their report. Do you understand it? Can you make heads or tails of what's important and what isn't important? How long will it take them to deliver the written report? Some of them will take a week if you give it to them. Some of them will give it to you next day. Getting it fast may be important. What if you only have a 5-day investigation contingency and the guy's going to come out on day 4? You must have the report by the 5th day. So you can't go with someone who's not going to have it for you for a week and a half. Ask the question. How do they take payment? Not all of them use Venmo or Zelle. They might need a personal check. They might need a money order. They might need a wire transfer. Personal checks are still very popular for this sort of thing. Will they be available after the inspection for you and your clients? That's important. Your buyer may be overwhelmed after the inspection, and then when they get the report, they have some questions. Your inspector should be completely available before the contingency deadline to answer their questions. What is their reputation and experience in this geographical region? So I once had an inspector inspect a property in Clayton. Clayton is a little bedroom community east of Concord in the East Bay in the deepest depths of Contra Costa County. And this inspector was great. He was really well known in Clayton. He was probably the #1 inspector in Clayton. Would I hire him for Bay Point or for Martinez or for San Francisco? Absolutely not. He doesn't know anything but Clayton. And there are plenty of good inspectors in those other places. So you want to know what they've got geographically going on. The other thing is, there are some inspectors who all they do is inspect high-rise apartment buildings. This is not the right inspector for a single-family home. Okay. The other thing is, you almost want to buy them a cup of coffee before you hire them the first time to get a sense of how nice they are. Are they the kind of person that's going to scare your client? I've had inspectors make my clients afraid. That's always bad. Okay. Now, there are some things inspectors have to point out. They're professionals too. They don't want your buyer to make a mistake and buy a property that's got a significant defect. But some of them do that in a way that is terrifying and maybe inappropriate. So I encourage you to interview them. And I would even ask them the question. So let's suppose you crawl underneath the house and you see a huge crack in the foundation. How would you communicate that to my client? You want them to be informative and friendly. You don't want them to be alarmist, because most condition issues are remediatable. Most issues of condition can be fixed. You can't fix that this is the third house on the street. You can't fix that the neighborhood has a drug house across the street, meth lab. You can't fix that there's a trolley, if it's in San Francisco, running down the street. All that stuff. Location stuff you can't usually fix. But condition issues at a price, almost always. So, most important piece of advice in this whole thing. If you get a buyer into contract or you are a seller going to market, get your inspection done as early as possible. These good inspectors, they book weeks in advance, especially when the market is supercharged. Don't waste time. Get on to them right away. You know, you usually want to give your buyers a first choice. They may have a relationship with an inspector already. So you might want to say, I use Bill and Tony. Here's Tony's edge. Here's Bill's edge. Which one would you like to order from if you don't have your own person? It's always good to let your buyers choose. They're paying for it. You're not paying for it if it's a buyer. If the seller's paying for it, the seller's paying for it, not their agent, right? Some of these inspectors will give you written report style options. My summary report is only $600, or you can have my comprehensive report for $850. Ask them what the difference is. Ask them to show them to you. Which one is going to be better for your client? If you have a repeat buyer client who just wants the bare bones facts, don't pay for a comprehensive report that tells them how to adjust the water main. And how to do all this maintenance stuff. They don't care. Summary reports are very good for sellers. Sellers don't want to invest in all that comprehensive extra stuff. Not all inspectors offer multiple report styles. The good ones do. Prices will vary all over the map. The cheapest inspections are now about $400 for small condos in the east. Now, this is more true in the Bay and the Peninsula. If you get out further east, past the San Francisco Bay Area, you can get cheaper inspections. 400 to about 1,000 is pretty typical. Depending on the size of the property, the reputation, and how much in demand the inspector is. And you want to verify for your client, when am I going to get the written report? Get them to make you a commitment. Okay. Tell them if you have a contingency deadline that we need to rush to meet to get to. All right, you're not done yet. You've ordered the inspection, but you have to prepare for it. Whether you are a listing agent getting ready to go to market or you are a buyer's agent, you want to verify with the seller that all personal property is out of the way of access to the water heater closet, to the crawl space hatch, to the attic hatch. You want to verify that power, gas, and water will be on for the inspection date and time. Sometimes, if it's a bank-owned foreclosure property, they've turned off all the utilities to save money. The contract actually talks about the seller's obligation to have utilities on. At least the car contract does. I don't know about the San Francisco contract. Verify that anything that is locked is unlocked for the inspection. You know, you go out to a house with the inspector and there's a deadbolt on the electrical panel, or on the water heater closet door. It's insane. And now your inspector can't do his job. That's very annoying. Get ahead of it. Do the inspection, get with the seller beforehand and make sure they get those open so your inspector can do the job you're paying him, your client is paying him for. Listing agents, special for listing agents. Because the state of California requires water heaters to be braced for earthquake and carbon monoxide and smoke detectors to be working, get that done before the home inspection. So that when you go to market, you can say they're in place and they're working and everything's kosher. Don't leave it for the buyer's agent to discover and you have to scramble to get it fixed before closing. Water heater bracing is especially sensitive. The good inspectors will try to shake the water heater to see how tight that bracing is. And if it's not, if they can shake the water heater, they'll put it on their report. And then you get to go back to the listing agent and say, as a buyer's agent, your bracing isn't worth the wire you use for it or whatever, right? In a nice way. Please see home inspection, and then you do a cut and paste. You do a screenshot of the section of the home inspection report that talks about the strap being loose, and you'll find all kinds of stuff like that. So that's more or less what I wanted to bring to bear about home inspections. And I want to open it up for questions now. But I'm putting this slide up here as well. If you want this, if you want your own copy of this slide deck, this QR code will get it to you. You just need to answer a couple questions to my assistant, and then she will send it to you. Does anyone have any questions though right now? I answered every
Stephen.
question. Oh, there is a question. Henry, what can I answer?
Yeah, I suspect I know the answer to it, but this really doesn't have any bearing whatsoever on compliance with building code and standards.
You're absolutely
The
right.
inspector. Okay.
Now, the good inspectors will tell you things they observe that are out of compliance. They are very concerned about health and safety-based code compliance. But most inspectors will not tell you every way that the home is out of compliance with the building code. And remember, current building code is going to be different than the building code in place when the home was built. So there'll be discrepancies there as well. But the good inspectors will tell you that there's a code compliance variance, especially for health and safety issues. Does that mean your buyer shouldn't buy the house or your seller needs to repair it? No. It's just a disclosure item. By the way, this has nothing to do with permitting either. This has nothing to do. So there's three things, right? There's the work being done in a professional and workmanlike manner, the work being in compliance with code, and the work being permitted by the city. Those are three very distinct things. The issue of whether the city has whether the owner has pulled a permit for the work, that never comes up in a home inspection. But what does come up, whether the work was done in a professional and workmanlike manner, and whether or not it is to code, especially health and safety related things. But it's a good question, Henry. It really is. Any other questions? Does anyone feel that they're now better equipped to read these reports and to talk to their clients about it? Okay. Okay, good. Well, that's all I got, guys. I'm going to, if no one has any more questions, I want to thank you all for coming to the presentation. I hope it was helpful. And I guess I will see you all at various offices in the coming week. Thanks, guys.
Stephen. Thanks.
Thank you, Stephen.
Happy